You are now listening to Handsome Reads. Hey faves, glad to see you made it back. I mean, after all, it is you that we're holding the door open for. So I invite you to come in quickly, grab your seat, preferred drink, partner, snack, adjust the AC, tell the neighbor's dog to pipe down as we set the mood for the season finale of Army of Sin. This episode, entitled Change of Heart Part 2, is set 19 years ago in Russia. Do you want to live? The stranger asked again, this time both in Russian and English, unsure of whether or not the injured woman understood him. The muzzle of a silencer peeked from the corner of the dumpster, gloved hands grasping the butt of a pistol. Any time today, 𝐲𝐿𝐾, he reiterated, no sense of panic in his voice. Yes, she hissed below her breath. I want to live. Fine, it is decided then. You shall live, the stranger clapped cheerfully, the perfect whites of his teeth making an appearance in the barely lit space. All 𝐲𝐿𝐾 saw was the movement of his shadow from where he squatted, in line with her head. No shots were fired, no grunts of pain heard as the night fell silent. Too silent to be believable. Come now, 𝐲𝐿𝐾, the stranger called from what sounded like the middle of the dead end, 2 heartbeats later. How am I even supposed to get out of here? Her leg was shot, and her body certainly felt heavier than the 120 the scale had indicated the last time she had weighed herself. Oh, and 𝐲𝐿𝐾, do leave the gun in your jacket. It won't be necessary, he called cheerfully. I can't, 𝐲𝐿𝐾 said weakly, her words barely louder than a croak. My, oh my, what a mess you have made of yourself, 𝐲𝐿𝐾, the stranger replied, lifting the mat of her blood-stuck hair to peer at her face. Allowing yourself to bleed out like this. Tisk, tisk. The stranger lifted her to a sitting position, holding onto her shoulders to prevent her from slumping over to her side once more. You're beautiful, she bubbled, staring into the clean-shaven planes of his face and into his deep brown eyes. I know, he replied, lips curving as he assessed her body for any further damage. Why couldn't I have met someone like you sooner? She thought to herself. She had never once shown any hint of interest in the males she met. The majority of them, after all, died by her hand before their looks ever came under consideration. Yet this man, with his tousled hair and perfect suit, called to her in a way that was frankly disconcerting. Listen, mortal, he interrupted her thoughts. Before I transport you, I need to slow this bleeding. I could heal it, he mused, with a finger tapping the tip of her nose. But that would give the ones you are about to meet nothing to do. Why have you called me that? She said, after multiple swallows, in the back of her mind, wondering why his words didn't fog the winter air as hers did. What? Mortal? Because that is what you are, 𝐲𝐿𝐾. A mortal. Even as he maintained verbal contact, in an effort to keep her conscious. Henri busied himself tearing the arm of her leather jacket off. Between the cold air and the tourniquet he was about to make for her leg, she would survive long enough for the woman she was about to meet to save her. Where are you? Do speak up there. What was that? He asked, pulling the ends as tight as possible as she grit her teeth through the pain. What are you? She repeated, the green of her eyes looking at him without fear. Good, Henri thought to himself. No fear would be important. Who I am, he said aloud, is not important. Why I saved you is. You will shortly meet two women, one of whom will be wearing a jaguar tattoo along the length of her shin. Trust them or die. Her body flinched at the bluntness of his words, her snow and gravel encrusted nails curling slightly as if fighting the urge to reach for her weapons. In addition, the three of you shall rescue 3 young spirits. Protect them, train them, and raise them as you would the children you shall never bear. Her eyes flared slightly as her lips grew thinner, the black hand tattooed around her neck shifting as she swallowed. Do you agree to the terms, mortal? Henri asked, pulling out the gold length of a pocket watch to snap it open. She nodded, the ends of her hair bearing some of the winter flakes that had just begun to fall. Reluctantly, she considered the new beginning this stranger offered. What do I call you? She asked, green eyes tracing each handsome angle of his face as her photographic memory snapped him. As we do not have enough time to go into the multitude of names I bear, you may call me Mr. Henri Donoma. Mr. Donoma, Faina replied, trying out the name for the very first time. Thank you. I would not be so eager to give thanks, mortal. Now, I should warn you, you will not be able to remember all of the night's events at once. I suggest letting them come back to you over the course of the weeks to come. Now, close your eyes, he commanded, even as he brought cupped hands away from his mouth, hands which glowed the color of the setting sun. Remember, trust them or die. The last image Faina registered as she bowed her head were the pointed tips of her savior's chocolate shoes. Present day. Faina blinked rapidly in an attempt to clear the white dots that danced in her field of vision as Mr. Donoma freed her from the hold of memory. Releasing her chin, he slid his hands into the pockets of his pants before reclaiming his original seat. There. All caught up. Now, will you behave yourself in a more civilized manner? Mr. Donoma asked, drawing the gold length of his pocket watch to peer into its open face. Her teeth clenched as he continued to hold her suspended in midair. Nodding slowly, she used her uninjured hand to straighten her clothes the instant he returned her to her feet, before once more taking the seat before him. Certainly you didn't think they were yours to keep, he asked, A thick eyebrow rose in question. Faina sat in silence, knowing she had been outmaneuvered all those years ago. You were to act as a guardian, a role which you fulfilled, you and the other women of this house. What will you do with them? She asked quietly, head hung in defeat. Save the world, Henri replied easily. Now, there are other matters to which I must attend. I leave you with the pleasure of informing the other women of my arrival. Her head snapped up at his words. Yes, corroborate your stories, my dear. When you regain consciousness, that is. Regain conscious. Marfaina's words died halfway up her throat, face blanching in pain as Henri lifted her dislocated arm and reinserted it into its socket. Blowing out the lamp he had lit on his arrival, Henri closed the door behind him, leaving the explanation of the disheveled room to the unconscious woman within. Outside the room, the natural dark of the wee morning, the rest of the manor continued their rest. Placing the fedora once more on his head, he buttoned the middle of his blazer before stepping off the porch. Soundless footsteps carrying him away to other, more important business. End of season. I know. I know. Questions, right? Those are the trappings of a good story. No? Just the right amount of questions mixed in with the right amount of unanswered questions. You will just have to trust me and tune in to season 2 as we follow along with our fallen angel on his quest. As the curtains have finally drawn to a close, I want to take this moment to thank everyone who played such an integral part in not only the original support behind writing this series, but also to my wife, my friends, and family who cheered me on when I threw out the idea of adapting it into a podcast and eventually a YouTube channel. You guys are the real MVPs. For more news on when season 2 will drop, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Handsome Reads. It's right there in my bio. I urge you to share with a friend or family member as we invite more and more people along for the ride. I have nothing but gratitude as I sign off on this first season. We did it. That's right. You and I, we did this. See you soon for season 2. Until next time, and as always, love and light.